Okay, we are live, I think. We always give it a second or two or five. But anyway, hey everybody. Thanks for joining us. So today we are going to be talking about our spring book club pick, which is Better Homes and Corpses, which I'm super excited to be talking with you again. I feel like even though this is a seasonal book club, it goes in the blink of an eye because it's like, I feel like we just met. Like
I know.
week, but it's been 3 months.
Yeah. And then real quick, just about the book club, for those of you who are on here, I do get questions like people asking like how to join the book club. What is the book club in general? So it's the Teacups and Murder book club, and it's seasonal. So we only read 4 books a year to make it very accessible. And then all the books that we're picking are going to be accessible, either ebook, audiobook, physical book. Like, we're trying to give you guys options. And usually, since cozy mysteries are very themed, it's going to be very themed depending on the season. So this one, what was it? Like home decor, antique theme? Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
Cleaning, that kind of vibe.
Yeah, which actually I didn't even realize when we were talking about this book. I didn't realize that there was some actual spring cleaning since they were cleaning out an entire estate basically. But that was a happy little coincidence.
Yeah, and Patrick's Day happened in the book.
Yes, exactly.
It was like 2 days, 3 days ago was St. Patrick's Day. So I was like, oh my God, this was a perfect pick.
Yeah, it all lined up perfectly. So this time, a couple of things. We're going to do kind of how we always do, which is a super casual chat. As you guys can see, it's just us today, which I think will be great because I missed your face so much, Samantha. But we also have a little visual this time around. I feel like there were a lot of characters in this book. So we created this kind of like character sheet so that you all could reference it at the very least, so I could reference it and actually remember people's names. So let's go ahead and share that and then we'll just jump in, right? Okay. So somebody's asking, did you already read the book you're discussing today? Yes. So this was our book club pick for spring. I think about a month and a half ago, we announced the book and we read it already to chat about it today. There will likely be spoilers. So if you don't care about that, stick around, but do want to kind of throw that out there since we will be talking about the ins and outs basically.
Yeah, but we'll save the spoilers. We'll go over the characters and then we'll save the spoilers for the end. So if you haven't read the ending yet, you can kind of hop out.
Good call. So I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm kind of putting you on the spot. You always do such a good job giving the about, like what the book is about. Do you mind doing that this time? Okay. I know it's technically my turn, but like I always meander with the plot and you just give it so succinct.
Okay, no worries. So Meg is our amateur sleuth in this book, and she likes to do antique shopping. She likes to go garage sailing. She has kind of a small business where she is, selling these antiques. She's going through a hard time. She just came out of a nasty breakup, and she just left her job where she was an editor at a magazine. So she's going back to her hometown, and her college friend, Elle, is that her college? Mm-hmm. No, Jillian. Her college best friend Jillian ends up hiring her to come to this estate. It's like this very rich estate in the Hamptons, and she wants her to kind of like catalog all of their items there. So as she's working for them, there's a murder. The mother of the estate dies, and she kind of has to figure out what's going on. And I feel like our amateur sleuth was in a very interesting position because she has ties to police officers as well. Her dad is a retired sheriff.
Yes.
That added a little more to her just being a regular amateur sleuth. I feel like she had more experience. So
yeah, and I loved that part. Yeah. Thank you. So succinct, like I said, because I just would have been talking and accidentally gave something away and then whatever. But speaking though of Meg and her kind of background with her dad being either, I think he's retired. Anyway, he was on the police force. And I loved that aspect. I just want to say out of the gate, this was one of the cozies where I really enjoyed how the sleuthing was done. I know there's always like a fine line with sometimes they're too nosy or sometimes they're too like passive. And I think she was like the right mix because she was smart because she had the background from her dad. Like he even asked her to send notes and stuff like that.
Right.
But then also at the same time, there were certain aspects where she knew where there was danger and was trying to involve the sheriff of the actual case and not just kind of go off on her own.
Right.
So I thought it was done well.
This is going to be interesting because I actually disagree with you.
Oh, really? Okay, let's hear it.
I agree in the sense that I think that I was very, it is very frustrating with amateur sleuths that try to solve the murder all by themselves and they put themselves in dangerous situations. She was very good at taking the evidence to the cops. Right. However, I feel like she did not do enough searching and investigating on her own. You know what I mean? Maybe we'll talk about this in the spoiler section, but she was sitting on a very like large piece clue that could have told her the book, which we'll talk about in a second, that could have told her who the murderer was. So I definitely feel like she things more so happened around her. Instead of her like seeking the truth and seeking, information.
Interesting.
I feel like she more so just was in the right place at the right time, kind of stumbled on everything.
No, I can definitely see what you mean by that. And that's hilarious that we kind of interpreted it differently. So kind of starting from the beginning of the book, one thing that I liked or that happened, that I liked / happened, is that we get the murder from the jump.
Right. Like,
and yeah. And I personally really appreciate that. I think, obviously different cozies have their own pacing, but for this particular book, I think that I really enjoyed how immediately we know like who dies and she's kind of tossed into things because I feel like sometimes it can drag, it has its advantages, but in this case, we automatically, so this isn't going to be a spoiler, so I'm just going to say it. Carolyn Spencer, who's the matriarch, she's the mother of Jillian and Cole and a couple of the other characters. She was the one who was murdered. And so essentially this time around, we got to hear about her personality through everybody else rather than seeing it for ourselves. Because obviously, in a lot of cozies, you'll meet someone and you learn about their character and then they die off, rather than this time around like she's dead and you're trying to figure out her personality and you're learning about her through everybody else.
Correct. Eve, this is the first in a series, which I feel like a lot of the book was kind of laying the groundwork for all of the side characters. Real quick, Spencer, what did you rate the book?
I would give it a 4.
Okay.
I enjoyed it, and I always hesitate because I listen to it on audio, which, as we know, I go back and forth because sometimes if I listen on audio, it sways me and I don't like it as much. I think this time around, I enjoyed it. The characters in the narration didn't bother me, so yeah, I would give it a 4. What about you?
I would give it a 3.
Okay.
You know what? I did enjoy it, but I feel like this has so far been my least favorite from the
interesting
last year.
Yeah,
I know, and maybe that's me. Like, I understand. I think you're someone who is okay with unlikable heroines. I, for some reason, just didn't like her. Yeah, I didn't like our heroine in that.
Okay, let's get into that because there was somebody I didn't like either. That I could probably spend the entire time talking about.
Is it cool? Is it cool?
Oh no, it's freaking Jillian. I hated her so much. Like, I just have to have a mini rant because because I was kind of taking notes as I was reading, and I have multiple notes where I'm like, what is up with this woman? Like, First I thought it was me because I'm like, she just lost her mom. Of course she's going to be a little catatonic, like not really all the way there. But then she like played the victim and was like super helpless in like this really pathetic, frustrating way. And then she seemed a little loopy. But then I'm like, well, maybe she has been getting slip drugs and that's how it like Oh my God, I did not like her whatsoever. But you didn't like Meg, so
Yeah.
I can
And
see. I'm actually surprised you rated it a 3 if you didn't like her.
okay, at first I was like a 2. It was a 2-star for like the whole book. And then the ending, I was like, okay, this is interesting what the author decided to do. So I'm gonna give it a 3. I love that you guys love Tripod. He was hands
I
down the
did
best
too.
character.
Yes,
He was the one
agree.
like saving them.
He saved the day.
Food. Like he was on it for sure. I loved him. Okay.
Yeah. And you know what? I actually was going to include Tripod in the list, but I'm like, if I was going to do that, then I'd open up the floodgates and have to include like the dad and all these other people.
Yeah,
so
true.
Next time, I'm going to include the animals.
So we'll go down the character list. Meg, our amateur sleuth. For me, the reason I didn't like her is I felt like she was a little judgmental. You know, she lives in the Hamptons, and these people have an extreme amount of wealth, and I feel like a part of her was just very judgmental. And I almost didn't like how most of her judgments was towards women. I didn't like the snide comments that she made towards like his Cole's ex-girlfriend.
I do agree about that. Yeah.
And things like that. Like she immediately didn't like the women just because she, you know, was interested in Cole. So I didn't like that. And also, there is a part in the book, we'll get to it when we get to him, that Cole was a main suspect, a pretty big suspect. And she had no reason, no thinking behind, like, as to why he wouldn't be it. It was simply because he was handsome.
She was into him. Yeah.
So I was like, I felt like she was a little bit blunt. As a romance reader, I feel like the romance here was just too much.
Shoehorned in? Oh my God. Yeah. I was gonna wait until we can wait till we get Nicole to that, because I too have thoughts about the romance, and it's not great. So so Meg is our amateur sleuth, our main character. Then we have Elle, who is her best friend, who I liked her. She kind of did her job supporting Cash. She wasn't really as involved as maybe other best friends in other series. Then we have Doc Heckler, who was essentially like her dad's spy, meaning he was a family friend, kind of a shoulder to lean on, give advice. I too liked him, but he wasn't super into, you know, the story either.
Groundwork. I feel like maybe Ellen Block will be more instrumental in the rest of this movie.
Okay. And I like that too, because I actually really like Doc. I thought he was funny. And so if that's the case, then I'm down for that. So obviously we have Caroline Spencer, who is, they call her the mother of the Hamptons. She's our murder victim. And she is the mother of Jillian and Cole. And so Jillian is her daughter, and she went to college with our main character, Meg. They were, I want to say, dorm mates at some point for a very brief time.
For a semester. It was only a semester.
Yeah, that's it. And so Jillian helped Meg essentially get her job, because she told her mother, Caroline, about this woman who she knows who can, you know, help with cataloging her stuff, blah, blah, blah. That's how Meg ends up there in the first place. But like I said, I did not like Jillian whatsoever. And like, I know my limitations. So when I was listening to the audiobook, I had to really think when I got annoyed, is it the audiobook or is it the actual words being said? And it was the actual words being said, because Jillian's character was all over the place. I don't want to like skip to the end or anything, but I don't think the way that her character was paid off in the, like, I still had questions about her at the end of the book. To that note, I'm still annoyed by her. I thought she was.
Her story was so convoluted.
Yeah,
you almost had to extend your disbelief of the fact that she would even hire Meg, because it's like you knew each other for a semester, and if you have these connections, I'm sure you have plenty of people who know antiques.
Yes.
And you know, they weren't really friends, but we were supposed to believe that Meg was taking care of her. Meg was like, you know, the one she confided in. So it seemed odd to me that Jillian entrusted Meg that much. And then also, you know, it started off with like, oh, she's having post-traumatic stress disorder because of what happened to her mom, but no, it's because of a boat accident. But it's not because of a boat accident. It's because of the medication. It was too much. Like, I don't know what she was actually diagnosed with. I couldn't. Yes
to this comment here. I couldn't either, and that's why I was so torn when I was reading the story, because I'm like, is it me being judgmental of, if put myself in Jillian's shoes again, if you just lose your mom, in this very horrific way, of course you would have some sort of PTSD. But again, I think that the character was all over the place. Like you said, I couldn't understand where her motivation was for acting that way. Like, she almost was treated like a child, which I couldn't get behind. Like, it's one thing if you have your friends and family kind of doting on you because you just lost your mom, but I think it went above and beyond in the sense to where they were really weirdly overprotective about this woman, with like having a curfew and like telling Meg, make sure you bring her back by a certain time, not because necessarily they think her life is in danger, but again, it's almost as if she's this child who can't be taken care of.
She didn't even
yes, exactly. And I couldn't, and I feel like there's a difference between being like sheltered, and it was just too many conflicting things. Because again, if you have that much money, your mom's Queen of the Hamptons, blah, 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 like, you're going to act a certain way. And even her mindset, like, was she acting that way before her mom died? Was it just the PTSD? I don't know.
I don't think it was all an act, because there were moments where even Meg noticed, like, oh, she's acting like a different person. Oh,
yes,
her writing style is showing this confident woman, and that's nothing like her. So I think everything was an act. Her mental illness, I don't think she was actually mentally ill, and if she was, I don't think the author did a good job at writing.
I totally agree. And you mentioned something about the way that she acted. I totally forgot about the voices that she put on, like the how Meg just kind of brushed that off, like, hello, I'm pretty sure that's a form of schizophrenia. Like, is that a coping mechanism? Like, I would be very concerned if I started hearing that from somebody, to where it's like, why aren't you reporting that to her doctor who was there? Like, rich people have doctors who are on call and there all the time, and she never once mentioned it to Dr. Green, who is the family doctor, which I thought that was probably just sloppy writing, if I'm being honest.
Cheryl, she did change into different voices. Her mom, her dad mainly, and like so well that the Meg was like, oh, it really, like, I thought it was a ghost who said it, or I thought it was a totally different person who said it. So it sounded like it. I thought she had schizophrenia the majority of it, but then I was like, oh, it was that much of an act. So her character had a lot left to be desired, for sure.
For sure. Okay, well, speaking of a lot left to be desired, let's talk about Cole. Who is Jillian's brother. He's kind of like the prodigal son, because he left home almost 20 years ago. I want to, right? 10 or 20 years ago. Okay, because of a couple of different accidents that he got in, and he felt so guilt-ridden, and his mother seemed like she didn't want him around, so he basically took off. And then naturally he returned back to town once he got word that his mom did pass, and it seemed as if the author was trying to ship Meg and Cole.
She was like shoving it into your face.
And I will be honest, I thought the romance was so forced in this book. I didn't get her attraction to him, like, not like I didn't understand why she was attracted to him. I didn't see it unfolding, I guess is what I should say.
I'm a romance reader. I love cozy mysteries that have romance in them. But this was like so poorly done, and I think it would actually been better if there was no romance. When
I agree.
They kissed, I was genuinely shocked. I was like, where did this come from? You don't know him. I like have no idea what's the attraction. There was even a point where like they were in public, and like she was like, okay, bye, babe, and like kissed him on the lips, and I was like, are you
what's happening?
Not dating? Like, what? This is it's weird. It's weird.
And I don't know if you remember that scene where they're at her apartment and they do kiss, and then something happens, she freaks out, basically the mood shifts, and he storms out. But then he does that thing, of course, in romance movies, which I'm a sucker for if it's well done. But like he comes back right like a minute later, right, to say one liner, and then she like melts all over again. But it seemed so contrite, and it just felt super forced because at this point she has no reason to really be into this guy other than the looks. And if that was the case, maybe the author needed to convey that more. But Meg was all about like, I don't think that he can do it, and his character and all of this. And it's like, you don't really know him.
I know he's a good guy. And I was like, do you though? I was like, we don't know he's a good guy. All we know is that he got into a boating accident that nearly killed his sister, a motorcycle accident that nearly killed his girlfriend, and then he left for 17 years.
Yeah. So admittedly, because I know with cozies, there is a certain aspect of not necessarily suspending disbelief, but where basically our amateur sleuth might have like a hunch and is adamant somebody is not the killer. So like their best friend or their aunt or even somebody random, I don't know. But I don't think that she convinced others well. And I was very put off by her reaction to him and his ex, Tara.
Oh yeah.
You know, and you know, the author did at some point give a quick little backstory about like why she feels so crappy toward her, but I don't think that was enough. It was just petty, some singular incident that happened literally years ago.
Yeah. I don't think she would have had any, hatred towards that woman, and if they weren't his ex. Like it was pure jealousy and pure like lust for him that made her think that he wasn't the murderer. So that's why I was just like, that's honestly what brought the rating down, because I was so like, I can't believe that this romance is happening. Like it doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
it's so early for a cozy mystery. Like for a cozy mystery, this is not common for the romance to escalate that quickly.
Yeah, and so it's funny that you say that, because speaking of the romance, so quickly to go to Adam, who's the next character on our list. He was the Caroline, the matriarch's assistant. He basically grew up with Jillian and Cole, whatever. They were all family friends. His character was okay. Like he was supposed to be unlikable. I think that the author conveyed that well. What I thought was super weird, that had no like payoff or roundabout way, is that he kisses Meg once. I don't know if you remember that scene, but it happened once, and I have
Meg doesn't
no
say
idea.
Anything. She just goes.
No. Yes, and that frustrated me, because I'm like, okay, I'm not put off by the fact that he kissed her. He seems like the kind of arrogant guy where he like tries to see what kind of moves he can make and how far he can go. But the fact that she didn't do one thing or the other, and it just kind of, again, she never brought it up. It didn't have any payoff. I thought that was super weird. And I thought at some point, for like 5 seconds, the author was going to try to make a love triangle, which is something that is common in cozies.
I did think it was going to be a love triangle, but not between Adam. I thought it was going to be Vaughn, Cole, and Meg. That's what I thought.
Interesting. Yeah. Because he too was acting interested-ish in her. And I'm like, I don't understand. I mean,
I feel like Adam was the distraction for the author. I feel like, okay, so I didn't think Adam was the murderer. We'll get to who we thought the murderer was at the end. But I feel like Adam was that villainous character that like the author wanted you to think was the murderer. That's how I felt about his character.
Yeah.
Because he was so like randomly just like he was so obnoxious about it.
It's too obvious. Yeah.
So
I agree. And I didn't mind him. I thought he served a purpose. We've seen this kind of character before, and it's like, okay, you're for the most part harmless, just you're there, you're supposed to be kind of a dick, the end.
Right.
Okay, so Adam's mom is Frances. I included her in here. She wasn't really on the page much, but I wanted to include her because they've mentioned her by name, and she was seen interacting with Tara and had some words to where maybe she could be involved somehow. She was supposed to again come off as not so likable, which I think that mission accomplished. I think Adam and his mom were the quintessential kind of snooty Hamptons elitist family. You think you're better than everybody, okay, whatever. So Salvatore, he is the resident artist. So he was described in the book as a family handyman, which is why I quoted it on there, but really he was just an artist living on the property, which I think was supposed to be intentionally vague to everybody in the story. And I liked his character. I don't think he was super fleshed out, but he was there. He was suave. Did you think at any point that he was in on anything?
No, I didn't really think he was involved in it. I thought he was more so like there to give us backstory. I never thought that he was a part of it.
Yeah, I agree. Another kind of tertiary character that was really just a segue to introduce his son Van. So Van, Salvatore's Salvatore's son, and he also grew up with Jillian and Cole because obviously his dad was living on the property. He was an interesting one. Kind of like I imagined him as like somebody who thinks he's more suave than he is, and kind of like this greasy kind of way. Okay. And I'm trying to think. I didn't think that he was involved. I never was suspicious of him. But I did think it was weird that they tried to maybe make him interested in our main character Meg. So a couple of other people also, Cherry, she's like, I thought, why do all these men like this woman? I totally agree.
Strange. She was not likable whatsoever. Vaughn, I suspected him from
really.
We met him. I can remember the scene when he's coming out of the forest. Why is he in the forest? He's coming out of the forest, and what threw me off was Meg internally was like, he's running towards me, and normally I would be scared, but he's too handsome to be a murderer. And I was like, nope.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
I was like, he is the murderer, just because the way she described him as being too handsome to be a murderer, like, it seemed forced. Like we were supposed to believe he was just this easygoing guy. But I was like, no, it's him. Like the second he came out of the forest, that's why I thought it was the whole time.
So, okay, I thought it was, because you guys know I'm bad at this. I'm just like flinging out guesses left and right. I actually thought, without any evidence, that it might have been Adam's mom, Frances, only because she wasn't mentioned that much. Because for me, it's always like the person that you least suspect. And so by process of elimination, I'm like, okay, it's got to be her. I thought because at some point they were saying Adam's dad seemed suspiciously close to Caroline Spencer. Maybe the mom got jealous somehow and then like realized there was a way to enact her revenge and then also get money that her son would inherit, and thus she would inherit, I mean, not money, but the things that she could like auction off, especially because there was that scene where she is seen with Tara in her shop. And so I kind of had my suspicions there about like, there was like a clock or something that was worth a lot of money that shouldn't have been in her shop. And so since the mom was in that scene at that time, I'm like, there's a couple of dots that I feel like I could connect together. Oh, somebody else thought so too.
Yeah, you weren't too far off, because when we talk about the spoilers, there was the murder, but then there was also like this financial side thing that she was kind of involved in, so you weren't too far off.
Yeah, I thought that was a little sloppy. I got to be honest. And it's funny. So let me just say really quick before we get to the last two characters. I rate cozies on a sliding scale. It's, for me, most of the time, it's about feeling and the descriptions. And I loved the Hamptons Montauk descriptions and the antiquing stuff, which is admittedly why I rated it so high. But when you're breaking it down, and this is kind of going back to that secondary issue, I thought that the author was trying to throw a lot in, like a bit too much, and everything wasn't really neat. And so the thing with Tara and Francis Prescott, their little side thing, I thought that was unnecessary, to be honest.
Yeah, I feel like the author at the end was going for like shock factor. It was like, and the murder. Oh, and there's finance, fraud, and oh, there's siblings, like, and they're dating, and there's an affair. It was like 4 shocking revelations all in one thing. And I was like, what is going on?
Yes, 100%. I can't believe I forgot about the sibling thing. Okay, so let's talk about
that everybody guessed the ending. Like, I had a piece of it, but not the whole thing.
Not the whole thing. Yeah.
Impossible that anyone guessed the whole thing.
No, the very, very, very ending, which again we'll talk about in a minute, but like I feel like there was 2 endings, like the ending, and then it was like the ending, and like almost like the epilogue ending. And that bit, I'm like, are you kidding me? Like that for sure was completely unnecessary. Okay, so Tara, I think we've already talked about her enough, but she was Cole's ex, technically Meg's nemesis or what have you. They did mention again at the beginning of the story an incident where like Tara nabbed one of these antique items that Meg was going for, and of course she got pissed about it, and then like Meg gave her own comeuppance by kind of doing the same things, petty shit basically, which like that's fair, but I don't think that that's grounds for hating anyone. And to be honest, I don't think Tara acted towards Meg in a bad way. Like there was one scene where she's like, do I know you? But like, first of all, maybe she actually did think she was forgettable. And then second of all, that's a personality type. I'm not going to base my entire judgment on like, I don't think that was so far-fetched.
I don't think there was anything wrong with Tara, like as a character, for her to be this villainous character. I think she was rude at times, but I almost feel like she was responding to the energy that Meg gave her. Because Meg was very rude from her in every interaction.
She walked into her store and just straight up insulted her.
Literally, like I was like, anytime that they talked, Meg was the one who sought her out and was rude to her. So I was like, I don't think Tara was a bad character whatsoever, and I'm curious to see how she continues to be in the rest of the book, because because she has to be. There's a store in the town.
Right, that's a really good point. And speaking of her store, the one thing that I did not like about Meg is when she was talking badly about Tara living in the store, which I thought that was just gross. Just with making fun of anybody's kind of living situation. Like it's one thing if you want to like say like, oh, she's a gold digger or whatever, but to see the reality of where she lives, because she kind of like peeks behind the curtains or whatever and mocks her to herself. Excuse me, and actually says something I think to Tara in passing. I don't remember what the line is, but I thought that was awful. But
she was judging her for being divorced, because Tara was also divorced, and she was like, oh, he probably couldn't deal with her. And I was like, excuse me, aren't you divorced too? Like you are also divorced.
Yeah, completely. That part I think was over the top, and I am glad. The one thing I am glad about is that the author had a scene with Tara's sister, who was a waitress at one of the restaurants that Meg went to, and I'm glad that the sister didn't talk shit about Tara, like her own sister. Basically, it's like they're clearly 2 different kinds of people. The sister essentially says as much, and that's it. Because I do think that that's realistic. Like, I'm not going to talk about my own sibling for this person who I barely know, which, come on. Okay, so the last character we have on the list, which I had to include, Dr. Green, who is the family doctor. I was suspicious about him as well. At some moments, I thought maybe him and Francis teamed up simply because he was the one giving Jillian meds. And Jillian was acting so flipping weird. I'm like, she has to be on something. Like, she
Take
has
his
to be being
medical
medicated.
license. Take his
Yeah.
medical license. He was
Yeah.
sketchy.
Yeah. He was very sketchy. And, you know, there were multiple scenes. And this, again, goes to the sloppiness maybe of the writing, or there was no payoff. I don't want to say it was sloppy, but multiple scenes where like Meg discovered pills or you know, vials and like scattered pills in bottles and stuff like that, which I'm like, okay, well, this clearly is explaining maybe why Jillian is acting the way that she is, but again, just too many random things happening with this woman. You can't really get a good read on her. And in the end, I still have questions about her character.
Yeah.
So we do have a couple of discussion questions. I feel like we've already sort of talked about these, but who was your, at least, so you mentioned Tripod. Was he your favorite character, or I guess your favorite human character? Who would that be?
Character. Oh boy, I don't feel like a lot of them were very likable.
Yeah.
I liked her dad.
Yeah, I did too.
And I liked Doc. So I liked the police force. I feel like they were, a lot of times when you read Cozy Mysteries, the police force is very rude sometimes to the amateur sleuths and don't accept them and their, you know, clues. But I feel like whenever she came with a clue to them, they did their due diligence and they tried to, you know, do more research on it. So I like Doc and I liked her dad.
That's a great point.
Go ahead. Who was your favorite?
Probably Doc as well. And I agree with you about the cops. I actually was surprised and I appreciated the fact that in the very beginning the cop asked her if she could kind of help out a little, because he trusted her instinct because of her dad. And towards the end, when he had a different mindset than what she had, I still think he didn't necessarily write her off, but it's like, okay, well, I've got this handled now. I mean, yeah, in the end he was wrong, but I don't think he was overly rude about it. Like, I've given you plenty of liberties throughout this entire time.
Yeah.
So yeah.
My least favorite character, I do think it was Meg. I just feel like she was such an unlikable heroine, very, very judgmental. I think if she wasn't so judgmental towards the women in particular, because she wasn't judgmental towards the men. Adam was a jerk, and she wasn't that judgmental towards him. But it was, you know, the Cole's exes and, you know, people with money that I feel like she was just jealous of. So if it wasn't for that, I feel like maybe I would have liked her a little bit more. But yeah.
I mean, but she'd have to go conquer quite a hurdle to be likable in that case, because I think you're absolutely right. My least favorite obviously was Jillian. Like, I could not, anytime I had like the valleys and the peaks and valleys when I was reading this, it was because of Jillian. Again, I couldn't quite get a read on her character, and then at the end, when everything is kind of revealed, I still had questions about her character and her intentions, basically. And people, okay, so everybody liked Doc, of course, her dad, excuse me, Elle, and Tripod, obviously. I mean, I think it's clear he stole the show. Some people, okay, Adam and Francis were your least favorite. I think those were pretty easy characters not to like.
I forgot about the housekeeper, Miss
Arnold. Oh, snap. Yes, I totally forgot to include them on the list, guys. My apologies.
Was the worst.
Yeah. But you know what, though, thinking about it, okay, so it's both Mr. and Mrs. Arnold, and I flubbed by not putting them on the list, because at some point I thought maybe Mr. Arnold could have been doing something, because he spoke weirdly fondly about Catherine, but I appreciated that, because at least it showed not everybody hated her. But as far as the housekeeper, Mrs. Arnold, she was rude, but at the same time, I feel like that's from years of being treated a certain way by the elite. She did essentially raise Jillian. And so I can see her being super protective, a little bit overprotective, but I thought it was more on Jillian to stand up for herself as a grown-ass woman. So I'm not really bothered by that. She was rude, yes.
When they got into the accident and she was like bleeding, Meg was bleeding. Miss Arnold was like, nobody cares about her.
Yeah.
Jillian. I was like, what?
Yeah. The husband was cool. Yeah, I mean, he was okay. I thought he was a little meek. But I mean, that dynamic with his wife being strong and a little rude, and then he's very beta and meek. I'm like, okay, I can I can dig that. A lot of unlikables. Yeah. But
Yeah.
is it, were they meant to be unlikable? I feel like that's what I tried to keep in mind when I was reading this story.
You have to. You have to have a set of characters that are unlikable because you have to you have to, think that any of them could be the murderer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, and there's some of them are just going to be terrible. And that's just, and also,
Yeah.
I think he was really pushing the rich elitist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so the next question that we have is whether your opinion changed about the book as you were reading it, peaks and valleys, or I think you kind of already mentioned you declined with Meg.
Well, no, I originally didn't like it. It was giving it me like a 2-star read, but then I was like, okay, I feel like you took some interesting things. You kept me on my toes. A 3-star. So the ending, although it was chaotic and did have some holes, it
Yeah.
did kind of save it just a little bit for me.
The ending had more holes than like one of those bullet sheets that you practice on. It was just, there's a lot going on at the ending. Yeah, so for me, I guess I was projecting because for me it was like roller coaster when I was reading this story. I think it started off super strong. I loved the setting, and for me that's kind of like the number one category when I'm reading cozies is whether or not I like the setting and the theme. And in this case, I liked both. So I'm interested in cozies set in the Hamptons. Who knew? But Jillian was my least favorite person. And so just when I would be like, okay, this is good, she would do something super unhinged. And I'm like, what? What's happening? So I would say my opinion is just all over the place till the end. Okay, so let's talk spoilers at this point because our next question is about did you guess the culprit? Which you guys know that I'm awful at that, but what about you?
I guessed Vaughn. I guessed Vaughn from the beginning, from them meeting him. Like I said, it was just disarming when she had said, like, oh, he's so attractive, but so is Ted Bundy. And I was like, okay, it's fine. I just
ding ding, red flags.
he had a lot, to strive for because he was involved with them, but he didn't have money. He could have felt like his father was jilted. His father kept telling him to stay away from them. So I knew it was Vaughn. I did not think Jillian was involved whatsoever. Maybe, I don't know. I didn't expect the sibling thing. I didn't expect the affair or the insurance fraud. Like none of that. None of it.
Yeah, it was off the rails because like you said, the hits just kept coming about reveal after reveal after reveal. Excuse me. And I don't even think all those layers were worth it. I obviously didn't guess. And I think even looking back, I could see Vaughn doing it, but Jillian, because her character was all over the place, at the very beginning, I thought, oh, maybe it's her because maybe she's faking however she is. But the way that she was acting was so all over the place. I'm like, there's no way it could be her at this point because she's just too frail and it can't be an act because she's just, again, weak and meager and vulnerable and all of these kinds of things. So when they revealed it was her and the both of them, I was surprised because it still didn't explain certain things about her character, like these voices. What was that? Like she only needed to say in the very beginning coal or cold or whatever it is, and then have Vaughn chase her in the woods. But putting on the voices like that, there was no reason for that whatsoever.
Yeah, and in the end, they did send her to like a mental hospital.
Yeah.
They didn't press charges against her for aiding and abetting or whatever.
Yeah, because she was almost catatonic when they found her after they found Vaughn. So it's like the author is insinuating that she had issues this whole time. In which case, I'm like, why? It's almost as if Vaughn took advantage of, like, I just can't see him even being attracted to her genuinely, you know, it's one thing if his whole thing was maybe like he wanted the money and he pretended to like her so she would help him, but they apparently were in love.
But
And
then when she was holding the gun to Meg, she was confident. Her speech was coherent. It almost seemed like she was acting that mental illness.
yes,
So
you're right.
To a mental illness hospital. So I was like, I'm confused.
Yeah. Yes, 100%. And again, I think that's why that bit was sloppy, because you can't get a handle, even when you know what's happened, you can't go back and look at all the things and see like, okay, well, that kind of makes sense. Yeah, the voices freaked you out. You're reading at night. I could see that. Yeah. Oh, okay. So part of your lower rating is because you don't like when the killer is someone with mental health issues. I can see that. And again, that's why I felt torn about Jillian's character, because I thought if she genuinely was this way, then that's not a fault. And so as a reader, you have to just go with that. But she flip-flopped back and forth that you just don't know. You couldn't really understand what her motivation was. So I could see that. So let's talk really quickly, just in case, since we're talking about spoilers, in case people don't know, like the real ending surprise. So the reveal is that, okay, so obviously Jillian and Vaughn were in it together, killed her mother. She wanted to give her mother's thumb, and they wanted to be together. So
and the mother didn't approve of their relationship.
Yes.
Because there was this thing about an affair and potentially them being siblings. Potentially.
Right. So allegedly, Salvatore and Caroline Spencer had an affair, with Jillian being the love child. And so that meant that Jillian and Vaughn actually were half siblings, which is why the mom didn't want them to be together, which is why Salvatore also didn't want them to be together, but he was more subtle about it. And so they killed the mom so that they can be together.
But they weren't actually siblings. They did have there was an affair, but they weren't actually siblings because Vaughn wasn't Salvatore's real son.
So that was the final twist, which I thought was so unnecessary, because maybe it could have been necessary, but the way that it was shoved in at the very end was so like, oh, by the way, they're not really siblings. And apparently Salvatore's ex, or Vaughn's mother, who is this famous actress, called Salvatore to let him know that Vaughn wasn't really his son. And it's like, it's a little too late for that now.
Yep.
So they did all this for nothing, is basically the reveal. And that's one of those, to me, that's the equivalent of you're reading a book or you're watching a movie, all this stuff happens, and at the very end they're like, surprise, it was just a dream. Like, it's cheap tricks. So
and then you explained the thing with Adam, because I don't understand what that was about.
So the side hustle that had nothing to do with the murder, but which is why Adam seemed suspicious, is that he essentially had this scheme going on with Tara and his mom. Was the mom involved?
Yes, the mom was involved.
Okay, the mom was involved. Where basically Tara
was involved?
Was she not? I mean, they took it to her store, right?
Oh, yeah, and they kissed. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. See, it's all over the place. Okay, so Tara and Adam and Adam's mom were all in this scheme together, where basically Adam would sneak pieces of Caroline's antiques, valuable antiques, out of the house, shop them around to different auction houses to see if they can get money for it. And there's one scene where when Meg is by Tara's shop, she sees one of these pieces that looks familiar to her. And that's because essentially they were stowing away some of the furniture at Tara's shop while they were trying to find a buyer. And then when the heat came on them, they returned it, they returned it back to Caroline Spencer's house. And it's a lot, basically. I too thought that was a little unnecessary. I'm not super mad about it though, because I know sometimes cozies have an A plot and a B plot, but it was sloppy again, which I'm talking about it now and I'm like, do I still rate it 4 stars? Because there was a lot of back and forth.
Yes, that whole thing could have just been left. Like, it could have been cut out of the story, and I feel like it actually would have been cleaner The sibling thing I was fine with, them, you know, being jilted because they couldn't be together and they needed money, like that's fine. But the antique thing with Adam, I was like, I don't even know what's happening. I have no idea what's happening.
Yeah, that's a good point, especially because, and I'm saying this not having read the second book, but if Tara is going to still be a continuing character, which if it follows a formula of other cozies, the unlikable character who's not the murderer is going to play a role. She technically would be in jail. So it's like they shouldn't have set her up to have actually been scheming or been part of a scheme.
Yeah.
She should have just been the unlikable character that Meg has to basically share space with. So I don't know. But speaking of the second book, would you continue the series?
I don't think so. And I think this is the only book that we've picked that I've said that.
Wow.
I was like, you know what? I like this. I want to see what the second book. I feel like cozies get better like by the third book is when it really starts, like, because you have so much, you know, history and like all that stuff. But no, I don't think so. Only because I can't stand Meg. She's so unlikable.
Yeah. I didn't mind Meg. I'm like trying to go through the conversations of her dialogue in my head. I didn't mind her, but I wouldn't continue the series at all. It's not my least favorite cozy. I would say the one coincidentally that we read last spring, the flower ones in I think so. Am I remembering that one as the one I didn't like the most? Yeah, I think that one was probably I think it was maybe because it was the most forgettable for me, and I'm not just saying that because it's been the longest.
Yeah, that was the first one we read.
But I didn't connect to any of those characters. Like, I also felt like there was a lot of characters in that book, and I didn't connect to any of them. I feel like even though the characters here were flighty, I had a better handle on them. Don't ask me why. It's not like I love them, but either way, I wouldn't necessarily continue the series. I don't think, though. I say this because I just was at the library earlier this afternoon. There's another cozy series set in the Hamptons. I want to read that one because I really did enjoy the Hampton settings. I also like the thrifting, antiquing, whatever aspect as well, but there are dozens of cozies that fit that bill, so I can get my fix with those.
Yeah, there's so many, especially if you're going in like the home renovation field, like so many home renovation cozies. So I mean, it was not bad. Obviously, we're going to be harsh about it because we're like dissecting character by character. But it wasn't bad. Like, it was a 3-star. It was solid. It was fine. It just was not my favorite. My favorite, I think, was the Christmas cozy.
Me too. Oh my gosh. Yes. It was so good that I would read that series when it's not Christmas, which for some people, they're like, I'll read that anytime. But I'm the kind of person where I could only read Christmas themed books during the holidays. And this was one where I'm like, I'm laughing because I was thinking like, oh man, I want to abandon this book and read the second book in the Christmas cozy.
That one was good. And then the summer book we had where she
by Bree Baker, that Seaside Cafe. Yeah.
Those are my two favorites. I love them.
Yeah, that one was my top favorite. The Christmas one was close second just because it was obviously set during Christmas. But yeah, this one, it's pretty low, but that's relative because like you were saying, like, even though we're super harsh and dissecting it, I don't think it was a bad book. Maybe if somebody reads it rather than listen. Well, no, I think the audio was fine. I wasn't annoyed by the audio. Yeah, so it was just the story. I think that it has enough of the cozy elements, which if we're going off of a checklist, like, it definitely fits the bill. You're getting that East Hamptons vibe. You're getting like tips about staining furniture. You're getting quirky side characters, which I have highlighted. The quotes written in the sand by the neighbor. I'm assuming he also is going to come up in future books just because he's like that quirky guy who's older than Salt, who's been living in the neighborhood. I did think that the scene where she's lying on the sand and he finds her was hilarious because he like picks a shell up off of her when she's begging for help. She's like, go get help. At the very end. Yeah.
I was like, am I blacking out? Because I don't remember.
Yeah, I pictured that scene so vividly in my head where she's just like, help me. And he looks like he might understand, but then he comes back and like takes the shell off of her, which I'm like, yeah, priorities, you know?
That's so funny. That is funny.
Yeah. So all in all, I think it was a book that
Yeah.
I can see other people liking. Um, and I think it's got a couple of its flaws, but it wasn't a DNF for me. So I think that
Oh,
that goes far because by scale with rating cozies is totally different than rating other books.
yeah. There was never a moment where I thought I was going to DNF this book. So
Yeah.
I agree with you.
If anything, the author succeeded because there was so much like what the hell is going on that it made me want to keep reading because I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm confused. What? I need to know what's going to happen next.
Yeah. Yeah. It was definitely very interesting, different from cozies I normally read. Just because of all the twists and the heavy on the romance.
Yeah.
Our next pick will be sometime in the summer, June or July, I'm assuming. So let us know if there's an author or even a theme that you guys want us to pick.
Yep.
I'll reiterate that this is a seasonal book club, so we only read 4 books a month. We do all of our updates on Instagram, all of them. So you'll
Yep.
find it on our personal channels, our Instagram stories, sometimes on our YouTube videos, but Instagram will definitely be the main place for the dates of the live show. And we'll try to post more frequently about them because I know a couple people said like they didn't know that this book. So we'll try to be more frequent since it is such a long time before we meet again.
Yeah, definitely. Which it has its perks because I'm like, okay, great, I've got some time. But let's be honest, both of us read this book I'll just say very closely to this time.
I really am.
Hey, that is better than like 20 minutes before the show.
Oh my
So
God.
you get a gold star. And honestly, I also because I have like gaps when I'm reading and I'm like, should I pick it up now? And I'm like, no, it's too early. And I have the memory of a goldfish. So if I read this too far out, I'm not gonna remember anything. So it all worked out. Anyway, well, thank you guys so much for joining us. This was super fun as always. And like Sam said, you can find all of our information in the description of this video and keep a lookout on our Instagram pages or our YouTube about what our pick for summer is, which I'm super excited about. So can't wait.
Yeah. All right.
All right. Thank you guys so much. Have a good evening. Bye,
Bye.
guys.